Welcome to the Lion's Share podcast, where we break down today's most impactful research and bring fresh insights from the academic frontier straight to you.
We are doing something a little different today.
Yeah, we are.
Usually when we talk about startups failing, we talk about the market. You know, things like the timing was wrong or the product just did not fit.
Or competitor X just completely crushed us.
Right. It is clean. It is external. And honestly, it makes everyone feel better. But today we are looking at a stack of research that suggests the true killer is actually inside the house.
It usually is. I mean, we like to blame the market because the market is impersonal. But the data suggests that the true point of failure is often the human capital architecture.
Which is a very fancy academic way of saying you built the wrong team.
Exactly.
And we are not just talking about bad employees here. We're not talking about someone stealing staplers from the supply closet. We are talking about a fundamental flaw in the biological engine of the company. So today, our mission is to dissect the anatomy of a founding team.
It is a massive topic.
It really is. And to do this, we are pulling from some heavy theoretical work by Steve Blank on founder archetypes. We are colliding that with some very rigid practical job data from Indeed and Business News Daily.
And then this is the fun part.
Yeah, this is the part I am really curious about. We're going to run all of this through a co-founder equity calculator.
Which is where things usually get pretty ugly.
It is where friendships go to die. But before we get to the math, let us look at the philosophy. We have this massive tension in our source material. On one hand, we have Steve Blank describing the early stage of a venture as absolute chaos.
Right.
And on the other hand, we have Indeed giving us a list of 11 C-suite roles. Chief Revenue Officer, Chief Information Officer, stuff that looks like it belongs on an IBM org chart.
That tension right there is exactly where most founders get lost. They try to apply the IBM map to the garage territory. And to understand why that fails, you have to understand Blank's core thesis. Startups are not smaller versions of big companies.
I feel like I hear that a lot, but I'm not sure people actually internalize it. It sounds like a bumper sticker. You know, what does it actually mean operationally?
Well, it means there are two completely different species. A big company executes a known business model.
Okay.
They know exactly who the customer is, they know the product works, and they know the pricing. Their entire job is efficiency. A startup, though, is a temporary organization designed to search for a business model. You are engaging in business model innovation.
So you are shifting from just trying to build a product to actually discovering a scalable way to create and capture value.
Precisely. You do not know who the customer is yet. You do not know if the product even works. So if you hire people who are good at execution...
People who need a roadmap.
Yeah, people who need a roadmap into a search environment, they will just freeze up. It is paralysis.
Because they are waiting for you to tell them what to do, and you do not know what to do yourself.
Exactly. You are paying them to drive a train on a track, but you are currently hacking through the jungle with a machete.
Okay, so if we are in the jungle, we need a very specific type of person. Blank moves away from traditional job titles here and uses archetypes. The golden trio, the hacker, the hustler, and the designer.
I love this framework because it strips away all the ego of corporate titles. It just focuses on function.
Let us break them down, but I do want to push back on them a bit as we go.
Yeah.
First up is the hacker. In my head, this is just the CTO, right? The person who writes the code.
It is much more intense than that. A CTO manages technology. A hacker is the technology. Blank defines this person as someone whose primary obsession is writing code better and faster than absolutely anyone else.
They are not in meetings all day.
No, they are not worrying about the product roadmap or the quarterly budget. They are worried about whether the architecture can handle the load.
Okay, but here's the problem with that. If you just have a hacker, you basically have a science project. You do not have a business.
Oh, correct. And that is exactly where the designer comes in. Now, traditionally, people hear designer and they think, oh, make the logo look pretty.
Right, pick the colors.
Yeah, but in the context of a minimum viable team or an MVT, this is the user interface and user experience expert.
The bridge between the code and the human.
Yes, because without the designer, you fall into what we call the engineer's trap.
What is that?
It is when you build a product that works perfectly from a technical standpoint, but it looks like the cockpit of a 747, and the user just wanted a tricycle.
You over-engineer it.
Because you lack the empathy to see it from the user's perspective. The designer is the empathy engine of the startup.
So the hacker builds the engine and the designer builds the steering wheel. That leaves the hustler.
The hustler, usually the CEO. Again, do not think of them as a manager. Think sales. But they are not selling a finished product. They are selling a hallucination.
A hallucination.
Yeah, at this early stage, the company does not exist. It is literally just an idea in your head. The hustler's job is to create a reality distortion field.
Okay, we have to pause on that term. Reality distortion field. It is a famous term, usually associated with Steve Jobs. But is it actually a definable skill, or is it just being slightly sociopathic?
I mean, it is a very fine line. But look at the famous anecdote about Jobs recruiting John Scully.
Right.
Scully is the CEO of Pepsi. He has one of the safest, highest-paying jobs in corporate America. Jobs, who is running this chaotic, messy computer company, looks at him and says, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?"
It is such a manipulative line, though.
It is, but it worked. That is the reality distortion field in action. It is the sheer charisma and force of will required to convince investors to give you millions of dollars and to convince employees to quit their stable jobs for an idea that statistically is almost guaranteed to fail.
Because if you are a rational manager, you look at the spreadsheet and say, the odds are terrible, I am out.
Exactly, which leads directly to that dumb CEO paradox the sources mention.
Yeah, the idea that the founding CEO is often the dumbest person in the room, that feels a bit insulting to our listeners who are founders.
Well, it is not about IQ. It is about the specific type of intelligence. If you put Wozniak, the genius engineer in charge of Apple, early on, Apple probably stays a local hobbyist club. Wozniak was too realistic. He knew the engineering limitations.
Jobs was technically dumber in that he did not know how to build the circuit board.
Right, but that ignorance allowed him to demand the impossible. He operated well in chaos because he did not respect the rules of physics.
So you need the hacker to know the rules, and you need the hustler to completely ignore them.
Precisely. That friction is the engine of early-stage venture creation.
Ask yourself this if you're listening to us right now. Does your current team actually have a reality distortion field, or do you just have a really good business plan? Because early on, the plan will not save you.
It definitely will not.
Okay, so that is the garage phase. We have our 3 pirates. But eventually, you have some funding. You need to grow up. And this is where we hit that Indeed source material, the list of 11 rigid corporate roles.
Yeah.
CEO, COO, CMO, CTO.
This is the danger zone. We call this title inflation.
Walk me through a scenario here. Let us say we are a team of 5 people. We have a product, we have a little bit of revenue. I decide we need to get serious. So I go out and hire a vice president of sales. I find a guy who is a VP at Oracle. Great resume, expensive suit. Why is that a mistake?
Oh, that is a classic death sentence for a startup. Here's what happens. You hire the Oracle VP. He comes in on day 1. He looks around for his sales team to manage. You do not have one.
Right.
He looks for the sales collateral, the slick brochures, the slide decks. You do not have them. He looks for the qualified leads list. You do not have it.
Because he is used to executing a process, not building one from scratch.
Exactly. He sits at his desk waiting for the corporate sales playbook so he can optimize it. Your job right now is to write the playbook. He fails not because he is bad at sales, but because he is a colonizer and you are still an explorer. He burns through your cash, gets frustrated that nothing works, and he leaves.
And you've wasted 6 months and 150 grand.
Easily.
So instead of a VP of sales, who should I have hired?
You stick with the hustler mentality or you look for business development. This is a critical distinction in the sources. Sales is exchanging a known product for money. Business development is figuring out who has the money and what unknown opportunity they might want to buy.
It is strategic versus transactional.
Yes. In the early days, you do not need a sales manager. You need a pathfinder.
This actually brings up a great guiding question for our listeners. How does a hustler CEO actually know when to step back and hire a process-oriented COO? Because eventually you do need the Oracle guy, right?
You do, but only when the search phase is over. When your business model is validated and your problem shifts from what are we selling to how do we sell 1,000 of these a day. That requires dynamic capabilities.
Dynamic capabilities. Let us unpack that term.
It is the ability of the team to essentially reconfigure its competencies as the market environment changes.
So shifting from a coding founder to a managerial CTO. Or moving from a visionary founder selling a dream to an executive managing a supply chain.
Exactly. If the team cannot dynamically reconfigure its skills, the venture stalls.
Let us talk about another role that founders seem to hoard forever, the product manager. The sources suggest this is one of the very first roles you should hire for, but founders hate giving it up.
Because it feels like giving up their baby. The product manager decides what features get built next. Founders naturally think, well, this is my vision, so I have to decide where the buttons go.
But is that not true? If I am the visionary, should I not control the product?
You should control the vision, absolutely, but not the ticket backlog. If the founder is acting as the product manager, they're spending 6 hours a day talking to engineers about bug fixes.
Which means they are not talking to investors.
And they are not selling the vision. You hire a product manager to be the translator between engineering and the market so you can go back to being the hustler.
So listener, ask yourself, are you holding on to the product manager role right now because you do not trust the process? Are you stifling your own growth by micromanaging the backlog?
Most likely, yes.
There is one role on the Indeed list that feels completely out of place in a startup, though. The CFO.
Yeah.
Chief Financial Officer. If I have $50,000 in the bank, do I really need a CFO, or is that just burning cash?
You do not need a full-time person in a suit, no. But you desperately need the function. And this is where the source uses a phrase that really stuck with me. Economic ethics.
Economic ethics. That sounds like a class I would have completely slept through in college.
It sounds dry until you realize it is basically about staying out of federal prison.
Oh, you have my attention now.
When you start taking investor money or when you start signing multi-year corporate contracts, things get legally complicated really fast. A hustler CEO might say, hey, we just signed a contract for $100,000 to be paid over 2 years. Let us book that as $100,000 in revenue today so our growth chart looks amazing for the next pitch.
And that is fraud.
That is revenue recognition fraud. A CFO, even a fractional one you hire for just 5 hours a month, is the person who steps in and says, no, we cannot do that. That is illegal.
You need that tension.
You need someone whose entire job is to protect the entity from the founder's own optimism.
It seems like the recurring theme here for early ventures is hybrid roles. You cannot hire 11 people, so you just mash them together. It is an amoeba organization.
Right. You might have a CTO/VP of engineering. In a big company, those are two very distinct jobs. The CTO looks at the future strategy, and the VP of engineering looks at the day-to-day team management. In a startup, you are doing both. You are coding the back end and doing the performance reviews.
It sounds exhausting.
It is deeply exhausting.
Which brings us to the most awkward part of this entire conversation. We have built the team. We have the hacker, the hustler, the designer. We are all exhausted. We are working 18 hours a day. How do we split the pie?
The equity split.
The default is just 50-50, right? We are partners. We split it down the middle.
And the co-founder equity calculator source basically screams, do not do this under any circumstances.
Why not? 50-50 seems fair. It seems like the best way to preserve the friendship.
It preserves the friendship on day 1. It completely destroys it on day 300.
Really?
Because contributions are never actually equal. Let us run a quick scenario. You and I start a company. I came up with the idea. It was my brilliant light bulb moment. But you are the hacker. You are actually writing the code that makes the app function.
I am just talking about it at coffee shops. If we split it 50-50, is that really fair?
I mean, without your idea, I am writing code for nothing. But without my code, you are just a guy yelling at clouds.
True. But the market values execution over ideas every single time. The calculator weights execution significantly higher than ideation. Ideas are incredibly cheap. Building things is hard. So if I am just the idea guy and I'm not doing the selling or the building, the calculator might say, I deserve 10% and you deserve 90%.
Ouch, 10% for the founder. That is going to bruise some egos.
It shatters egos. But there is a much deeper concept at play here that the sources allude to, resource dependence theory.
We mentioned this briefly in the intro. Break this down for us. Think of it like oxygen in a submarine. In any room, the person who controls the oxygen tank holds all the power. In a startup, you have to objectively ask who controls the critical scarce resource.
Is the scarce resource not always money?
Sometimes, but usually in the early stages, the scarce resource is technical capability or unique market access. So you ask yourself, if the hacker gets hit by a bus tomorrow, does the company die?
Well, if I am the only one who knows how the proprietary algorithm works, then yes, the company's completely dead.
Then you hold the oxygen. That is known as the bus factor. The equity calculator literally asks, if this person leaves, can we still generate revenue? If the answer is no, that person commands a massive premium in equity.
So if I am the hustler CEO and I leave?
We can probably go hire another sales guy. It might hurt our momentum, but the code still runs.
Yeah.
If the hacker leaves, the screen goes black. That is why technical co-founders often command such high equity, even if they are not the CEO. They hold the resource dependence.
So here is a question for the listener. If we applied the equity calculator to your team today, would the split actually match your current cap table? Or are you giving away half your company for an idea?
Most people are going to be uncomfortable with the answer to that.
It is a brutal way to look at your friends, though, just asking, how replaceable are you?
It is not about friendship. You are designing a human capital architecture. You have to value the parts based on what they actually do for the machine, not how much you enjoy having a beer with them.
Speaking of having a beer, let us talk about culture. Every startup book on the planet says hire for culture fit. And the data from our sources says a bad hire costs around $17,000 on average.
Right.
But is there a trap hidden in this culture fit advice?
The trap is that culture fit usually just becomes code for someone I would like to have a beer with.
Which means someone who thinks exactly like me.
Exactly. It breeds homogeneity. And homogeneity is absolutely fatal in a startup. Think about it. If you have 3 founders and they all went to the same business school and they all read the exact same blogs and they all approach risk the same way, you have a massive blind spot.
You have 3 hustlers and 0 hackers.
Or you have 3 wild optimists and 0 pessimists. You need cognitive diversity. You need someone on the team who looks at your reality distortion field and says, wow, that is a cool story, but we run out of cash in 12 days.
If everyone is just drinking the Kool-Aid, the cold dies. You need a skeptic.
Yes. Does your hiring process prioritize cognitive diversity, or does it just prioritize comfort? Because if it is comfort, you are setting yourself up for failure.
So practically speaking, how does a listener audit this? We have talked about a lot of theory here. If I am an innovation leader or a founder listening to this, and I'm looking at my org chart, what am I actually looking for?
I would strongly suggest doing the calendar test.
The calendar test. What is that?
Ignore the fancy titles on LinkedIn. Open your team's calendars for the last 2 weeks and look at what they actually did hour by hour. If your CTO spent 90% of their time just writing code and 0% of their time recruiting engineers or planning future architecture, they are not a CTO. They are a lead developer.
And that is okay, right?
It is perfectly okay, but you need to be honest about it. Do not pay them a CTO salary or give them CTO equity if they are doing a lead developer's job. And conversely, if you are the CEO and your calendar shows you spend 80% of your time tweaking the website's color palette,
then I am not the CEO at all. I am plain designer.
And you are completely neglecting the actual CEO duties. Fundraising, recruiting, and selling the vision to the market. The calendar test strips away the vanity titles and reveals the real anatomy of your team.
Another great question for you listening. Are your job titles based on execution, meaning what you actually do today? Or are they based on ego, meaning what you want to be in 5 years?
The calendar never lies.
That is painfully practical. I think a lot of people are going to check their calendars after this and just cringe.
Good. Cringing is the very first step to fixing the architecture.
There is one last thing I want to touch on from the Indeed source regarding outsourcing, because it heavily suggests outsourcing things like HR, accounting, and even web development. But based on everything we just said about the hacker archetype, isn't outsourcing your product incredibly dangerous?
It really depends on your core business model. If you are a local bakery, please, by all means, outsource your website. You make bread, you do not write code. But if you are a tech startup, if you are a SaaS platform or a fintech app, and you outsource your core development to an agency,
You are basically renting your core competency.
you are not a tech company anymore. You are a marketing agency wrapped around a third-party vendor. You are building 0 intellectual property. If that vendor doubles their hourly rate tomorrow or goes bankrupt, you are dead. You have 0 resource independence. You are fully dependent on an external lung.
That loops perfectly back to the theory we discussed. You have to physically own the thing that creates the value.
Exactly. Do not outsource the engine.
So let us synthesize this and wrap up. We started with the absolute chaos of the garage, which is Steve Blank's world. And we talked about the rigid transition to the C-suite, which is the Indeed world. The overarching takeaway seems to be that you have to respect the specific phase your venture is in.
Yes. Do not try to build a C-suite in a garage. And conversely, do not try to run a 50-person scaling company like you are still in a garage. The true art of corporate entrepreneurship is managing the gradient between those two states, is knowing exactly when to fire yourself from a hybrid role and hire a dedicated specialist.
And realizing that your early co-founder might not actually be the right person for the next phase of growth, which is an incredibly hard human conversation to have.
It is the hardest conversation. But the math of the equity calculator and the reality of dynamic capabilities, they do not care about feelings.
I want to leave everyone with a final provocative thought to chew on. We talked heavily about the hustler today, the visionary who distorts reality. And we talk about the hacker and the designer. But we live in a world right now where AI is getting remarkably good at hacking. It can write flawless code. It can create beautiful user interfaces.
It is rapidly executing those specialized tasks, yes.
Right. So if the hacker and the designer eventually get automated or highly augmented, what is left of the founding team?
The hustler.
Exactly. Can an AI have a reality distortion field? Can ChatGPT look an angel investor in the eye and convince them to bet their life savings on a wild dream?
That is the ultimate question. AI operates strictly on probability. It predicts the most likely next word or outcome. But a startup inherently operates on impossibility. It bets on the highly unlikely outcome. I do not think an AI can ever be irrational enough to be a true founder.
So the dumb CEO paradox might actually be the very last job safe from automation, simply because it requires ignoring the historical data.
Exactly. Irrational, audacious optimism is a uniquely human feature.
On that note, go audit your calendar, check your bus factor, and maybe give your dumb CEO a hug. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.
Thanks for tuning into the Lion's Share podcast. If you enjoyed today's discussion, share it with a friend and join us next time for more ideas worth talking about. We'll see you next time.